Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep on the philosophy of language.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, we've got all these articles and research about how language works,
Okay.
how it connects to our thoughts,
Right.
and maybe even shapes our reality.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's can we even think without words?
Yeah.
Does speaking French
Right.
make you see the world differently than someone who speaks, say, Japanese?
Those are exactly the kinds of questions that philosophers of language think about, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get too existential,
Sure.
let's start with something a bit more basic.
Okay.
Meaning,
Okay.
we use words every single day,
We do.
but how do these squiggles on paper or sounds in the air actually mean anything?
Right. It seems so simple.
It does.
But when you actually start to dig into it,
Yeah.
it gets incredibly complex.
Right.
One of the first people to really kind of dig into this was Gottlob Frege
Okay.
back in the late 1800s.
Wow.
And he came up with this idea, this distinction between sense and reference. Right. And it totally changed how we think about meaning.
Sense and reference.
Yeah.
All right. Break it down for me. I'm intrigued,
Okay.
but I'm also a little lost.
Okay, so think about it this way.
Okay.
Imagine two phrases.
Okay.
The brightest star in the morning sky
Mm-hmm.
and the brightest star in the evening sky.
Okay.
They conjure up different images, right?
Yeah.
One feels like dawn, the other one feels like dusk.
Yeah.
They have different senses, different vibes.
Yeah, they totally do have different vibes.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're both talking about the same thing.
Right, like Venus.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And that's Frege's point.
Okay.
Both phrases refer to the same object, Venus,
Uh-huh.
but they have different senses. Meaning isn't just about what a word points to the real world.
Right.
It's also about how it presents that thing, the connotations it carries.
Okay, that's a really cool distinction.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how advertisers are always trying to find the perfect words
Yes.
to sell their product.
Right.
Like the ultimate cleaning solution
Right.
sounds way more appealing than just cleaning spray,
Totally.
even if they basically do the same thing.
Exactly. That's a great example.
Yeah.
And, Frege's ideas are still very relevant today.
Yeah.
But the question of how do words get meaning goes even deeper.
Okay.
And that's where we get into kind of two camps of thought.
Okay.
Semantic theories
Okay.
and pragmatic theories.
Two camps. All right, let's have a philosophical showdown.
Yeah.
What are they all about?
Okay, so think of it this way.
Okay.
Semantic theories are all about the nuts and bolts of language itself.
Okay.
So they focus on the rules,
Mm-hmm.
the structure, the relationships between words
Right.
to figure out how meaning is generated.
Okay.
Like when you're trying to decipher a complicated instruction manual,
Yeah.
that's your brain doing semantic work.
Okay, makes sense. So what about the other camp?
All right.
Pragmatic theories.
Pragmatic theories come along and say, hold on,
Okay.
meaning isn't just about the words themselves. It's
Mhm.
about how people use language in real situations.
Right.
Context is everything.
Yeah.
Think about a text message that just says K.
Okay.
On the surface, it's just a letter,
Right.
but depending on the context, you might interpret it as annoyed, dismissive, or even passive-aggressive.
Ooh, I've definitely been on the receiving end of a few passive-aggressive K texts.
Right.
I never realized that was philosophy in action.
It is.
So are you saying that we're constantly switching between these two ways of understanding meaning without even realizing it?
Exactly. We're using both semantic and pragmatic reasoning all the time.
Wow.
It's only when you start thinking about it consciously that you really appreciate how complex language is.
Okay, I'm starting to feel like I've unlocked a secret level of language awareness.
That's great.
So if figuring out meaning is this complex, how does language actually connect to the real world?
Yeah.
Do words just point to things directly, or is there something more going on?
That's a great question. There's a theory called direct reference theory.
Okay.
That argues that some terms, like proper names, just directly latch onto things.
Right.
So your name, for example, doesn't really describe you,
Uh-huh.
but it uniquely identifies you.
Right. It's like a label, not a description.
Exactly. But when you start thinking about more complex words,
Yeah.
it gets trickier.
Yeah.
That's where things like metaphors, similes, and cultural associations come in.
Right.
The word home refers to a physical place,
Mm-hmm.
but it also carries a whole bunch of emotional baggage for most people.
Yeah. Okay. I'm starting to see how words can be both simple and incredibly layered at the same time.
Yeah.
This is really making me think. But you mentioned something earlier that totally blew my mind.
Okay.
Something about language actually shaping how we think.
You're talking about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Okay.
Now, this one is controversial,
Okay.
but incredibly fascinating.
All right.
It suggests that the structure of a language can actually influence how its speakers perceive
Okay.
and categorize the world around them.
Wait, so you're saying that the very words we use can actually change how we experience the world?
Yeah.
How does that even work?
Well, think about it this way. Imagine a language that doesn't have a separate word for the color blue.
Okay.
Would speakers of that language see the sky differently than we do?
Wow.
Would they lump blue in with green, or maybe just not even notice the difference?
Okay.
That's the kind of mind-bending question that this hypothesis raises.
Okay, I need a minute to process that. It's like
Yeah.
someone just upgraded my brain's operating system.
It's a big idea,
It is.
and it gets at the heart of the relationship between language, thought, and reality.
So we've got words with different senses and references. We've
Yes.
got different theories about how meaning is created.
Yes.
And now we've got this idea that language might be shaping our perception of the world.
It's true.
My head is spinning,
Yeah.
but in a good way. So we're just getting started.
We're just getting started. There's so many brilliant minds and fascinating ideas in this field.
Well, I'm ready to meet them. Who are some of the key players in this philosophical language game?
Well, let's start with someone whose name is practically synonymous with the philosophy of language.
Okay.
Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Okay.
Wittgenstein is interesting because he actually had kind of a major shift in his thinking about language.
Oh, a philosophical plot twist. Tell me more.
So in his early work, he had this idea that language was like a picture of reality,
Okay.
that sentences directly corresponded to facts in the world,
Oh.
like a mirror reflecting what's out there.
Okay. I can kind of see that like words as labels for things.
Yeah.
But you said he changed his mind?
He did. Later on, Wittgenstein started to see language not as a static picture,
Okay.
but as a dynamic tool.
Okay.
And he came up with this idea of language games.
Language games.
He said that the meaning of words comes from how we use them in different social situations,
Okay.
like giving orders,
Mm-hmm.
making jokes, telling stories.
Right.
Each one has its own rules and conventions.
So it's not just about matching words to things in the world.
Yeah.
It's about the whole game we're playing with language.
Exactly. And this shift in Wittgenstein's thinking was huge.
Yeah.
It opened up this whole new way of understanding how language works.
That's really interesting. It makes me think about how we use language differently
Yeah.
depending on who we're talking to.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't use the same words with my grandma as I would with my friends.
Exactly right. We instinctively adapt our language to fit the situation.
Yeah.
It's like we're all fluent in multiple language games without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And this brings us to another key figure,
Okay.
Ferdinand de Saussure.
Ferdinand de Saussure.
He is considered the father of structuralism.
Structuralism. Okay, that sounds a bit intimidating.
Yeah.
Is this where we need to dust off our geometry textbooks?
Not quite. But Saussure did revolutionize how we think about language as a system.
Okay.
He said that language is made up of signs,
Okay.
and each sign has two parts. A signifier, which is the sound or the written word,
Mm-hmm.
and the signified,
Okay.
which is the concept it represents.
So, like, the word tree is the signifier,
Yeah.
and the actual idea of a tree in my head is the signified.
You got it.
Okay.
And Saussure's big insight was that these signs don't exist in isolation.
Okay.
Language is a system where signs relate to each other in complex ways.
Gotcha.
Think of a stop sign.
Okay.
So the red octagon.
Yeah.
That's the signifier.
Okay.
And the concept of stop is the signifying.
Mm.
Together, they make up the sign that keeps us safe on the road.
Okay, that's a really clear example. So understanding the relationships between these signs helps us understand how language creates meaning.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this idea of language as a structured system had a huge impact
Okay.
on linguistics,
Mhm.
literary theory, even anthropology.
Wow, these guys were really shaking things up.
They were.
So who else should we add to our philosophical all-star team?
Well, we can't talk about language without mentioning Noam Chomsky,
Noam Chomsky. Okay.
the rock star linguist.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely heard that name before.
Yeah,
Didn't he have some pretty radical ideas about how language works?
he did. Chomsky is famous for his theory of universal grammar.
Universal grammar. Okay.
He argued that all human languages,
Mhm.
despite their surface differences,
Yeah.
actually share a deep underlying structure.
Wow.
Like there's a universal language code that we're all born with.
So, like, our brains are pre-wired for language.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. But if there's this universal structure,
Yeah.
why are there so many different languages?
That's a great question.
Ah,
Chomsky argues that this underlying structure provides a framework,
okay.
but the specific details of each language are shaped by culture history environment.
Right.
It's like having a blueprint for a house.
Okay.
The basic structure is the same.
Right.
But you can customize it
Yeah.
with different layouts, material styles.
I love that analogy. So we're all born with this blueprint for language, and then our experiences kind of fill in the details.
Right.
It makes me wonder if we're all wired for language in the same way. Does that mean we all think in the same way, too?
That's a really deep question, and it gets back to some of the big questions we posed at the beginning. Like, can we even think without language?
Right.
And does the language we speak shape our thoughts?
Yeah.
Or simply express them?
Ah, yes, those million-dollar questions. Any chance of winning the philosophical lottery today?
Yeah.
And getting some definitive answers?
I wish it were that easy.
Yeah.
The relationship between language and thought is one of the most complex and debated topics in philosophy and cognitive science.
Sure.
But even though we don't have all the answers,
Yeah.
exploring these questions can be incredibly insightful.
Okay, I'm game for a good philosophical exploration.
Right.
So lay it on me. What are some of the different perspectives on language and thought? Okay, so let's dive into these different perspectives.
Yep.
Are there really people who think we can't think at all without language?
There are, and they have some pretty good arguments.
Okay.
They say that language gives us the tools to categorize the world,
Right.
to form concepts, to make connections between things.
Okay.
Without language, our thoughts would just be a jumble of like raw sensations and images.
I could see that, right? Language provides the scaffolding for our thoughts to take shape.
Yeah.
But then how do you explain, like, a dog knowing it's dinner time even though they don't speak English?
Right.
Or babies understanding things before they can talk?
Well, that's the counter argument.
Right.
People who believe in thought without language point to those examples.
Okay.
As well as things like nonverbal communication and the ability of animals to problem solve.
Right.
They argue that thought, at least on some level, can exist independently of language.
So we've got team language shapes thought and team thought without language.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's no clear winner in this philosophical debate.
Not really. It's probably somewhere in between. Language definitely influences how we think, but it's not the whole story.
Okay.
Think about it this way.
Sure.
You can have a thought like, I'm thirsty,
Yeah.
without needing to put it into words.
Right.
But language gives you a way to express that thought,
Okay.
to share it with others, and maybe even to reflect on it more deeply.
I see what you mean. It's like language adds another layer to thought.
Right.
It helps us refine it, communicate it, and maybe even understand it better ourselves.
Exactly. It's a complex interplay between language, thought culture, and individual experience.
Right.
And it's a reminder that even without definitive answers, engaging with these questions can be incredibly enriching.
Absolutely. It's about the journey of exploration, not just arriving at a final destination.
Right.
And speaking of journeys, I feel like we've taken our listener on quite a ride through the philosophy of language today.
Yeah, it has been a journey.
We've gone from the basic building blocks of meaning to this mind-bending idea
It's true.
that language might be shaping our very perception of reality.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So before we wrap up,
Sure.
I think it's important to remind everyone that language isn't just some abstract philosophical concept.
Yeah.
It's something that we use every single day
Right.
to connect with each other,
Yes.
to build relationships,
Yeah.
share ideas,
Mhm.
make sense of the world.
Couldn't agree more at its heart. Language is a tool for connection.
Okay.
And, as you continue to explore the world of language and thought,
Yeah.
I encourage you to think about the ways in which language connects us, divides us,
Right.
and ultimately shapes our shared human experience.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
So as we reach the end of this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a challenge.
Okay.
Pay attention to language today.
Yeah.
Notice how it's being used in different situations.
Right.
How it shapes your thoughts.
Yeah.
How it connects you to others.
I love that. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yes.
If you hear a word or a phrase that strikes you as odd or interesting, dig deeper. Explore its etymology, its different meanings, its cultural significance.
Right.
Remember, language is a living, breathing thing. It's constantly evolving and changing.
So be curious, be playful, and most importantly, have fun with it. That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this linguistic adventure. Until next time, happy wordsmithing.